The first presentation is from Overland Park Preservation Program from Mike Ross. Mike is a graduate of University of Missouri-Rolla, has been with the city for 37 years and is the city engineer. And I'd like to welcome Mike up to talk about the Overland Park Preservation Program.
So I am from the city of Overland Park, Kansas. For those of you who don't know, Overland Park is a suburb of Kansas City. It has a population of 180,000, which makes it the second largest city in Kansas. We have a public street network of about 2,000 lane miles. Most of the city was built after 1960, but it was founded around the turn of the last century by William Strang. So there are streets that date back to the early 1900s. The Wright brothers actually landed about a mile from City Hall to visit their old pal, Octave Chanute, who was the city engineer for Kansas City, Kansas. And he designed their airplane for them, so they landed there in Overland Park, which kind of dates it. But again, most of the streets were built in 1960 or later. As you can imagine, we have various street standards. The standards in place in 1960 were a little different than the ones we use today. I don't think they'd heard about perpetual pavement. And most of our streets are asphalt. There's kind of a story behind that too. One of the very first city councilmen in the newly formed Overland Park, his name was Matt Ross, determined that the city really ought to keep records of street maintenance so that they'd have that information to track street maintenance over time. And so that was kept on paper until the mid-1980s, and we, through APWA, started using the Corps of Engineer Paver program. We hooked up to a computer in Boeing Computer Services in Seattle and downloaded data for literally days over a 300 baud modem and got reports. But we've used Paver since the 1980s. It has changed significantly since then. We have it tied to our mapping system. Paver defines a street network, and you break it down into street sections. Each section is what would be a project. It's a homogeneous section of street. And for each one of those streets, we have a layer history, every layer that the street is made of, and including the subgrades. We divided the street network into classes. So we have 8-inch full depth asphalt streets. We have thin asphalt on granular base. You know, we have a number of classes, and that's important for modeling. And then we have a condition database of the condition of all of our roads that we maintain, and we keep track since the since about late 1990s, actually, ad hoc maintenance that we do on our street network. We tie that to each section so that we can see for any given street what maintenance has been performed on it. The Paver measurement, if you're not familiar with it, is actually described by ASTM D 6433. It utilizes small sampling statistics. It would be very costly to measure every square inch of every pavement on your hands and knees, measuring cracks, which is what they do. And so it utilizes small sampling statistics. Again, it is very important that your sections be homogeneous so that when you do that, you get a representative sample. And in Overland Park, we inspect about 15% of the total area of a street. So that each section is divided into samples. The samples are randomly selected. We go out and inspect, again, about 15% of the street. And we do that every 2 years. So our entire network has a condition over the course of a 2-year period. We enter the data on Android tablets now, Samsung Galaxy tablets, which give you GPS, they give you a camera, they give you a fairly competent Linux computer. And so you can develop pretty sophisticated data entry applications that you can take in the field with you. When we started back in the 1980s, we used a HP portable computer that used a magnetic tape to record the data. And I think one of the reasons that we've been able to succeed in doing this every 2 years is that we have always had a digital data entry device so that we didn't have to transcribe notes. Overland Park's had a number of programs where people go out with tablets and pieces of paper, and at the end of a summer season, they have literally feet-high stacks of paper that somebody needs to enter, and they never get entered. There's never enough time to do that. So doing it digitally has been very helpful for us. This is a screenshot of the database that we have. This is for one street section. The top part shows attributes of that particular street section, when it was built, the class, where it goes to and from. The yellow and white grid on top is the layer history, each layer from the time the street was constructed and every maintenance treatment that's been applied. Below that is any work orders that we've done for our maintenance division, ad hoc maintenance. So if the condition gets better on a condition plot, you can explain it with maintenance going out and doing crack sealing, which improves the PCI. Along the bottom are the pavement condition indexes every 2 years, curb condition index. What we determined that curb condition was important to us, and Paver doesn't really address curbs, so we do 2 inspections on each street section. We inspect the pavement, the asphalt pavement, and then we treat the curb as if it were a pavement and inspect it as well. We also have a ARRB roughometer, which is an inertial roughometer, and we measure IRI on our thoroughfare roads every year. And that information is recorded. It doesn't work too good on the local streets, but it's useful information on thoroughfares. And we stopped putting our college students out on thoroughfares a number of years ago, fearful that we would kill some of them. We haven't killed anybody yet. We've been doing it for a long time, and we didn't want to start, so we stopped putting people out on Metcalf, college kids on Metcalf, because they really, it's dangerous. So for that section we just looked at, this is a condition plot over time. The x-axis is years starting in 1970. We don't have any condition data until the mid-1980s, so that's why the line goes vertical. The red line goes vertical across the top. There's a purple vertical line right in the middle of the plot, and that was a reconstruction of that street. And you can see in this particular example, the reconstruction was very effective. The red lines, dashed lines near the right part of the plot are microsurfacing treatments. So you can see as the treatments are applied, the impact it has on the street condition. And what we found with our microsurfacing experiment was it was a bust. It wasn't effective, so we stopped doing that. And on the right side of this plot is the now line, which is today. There's a condition point to the right of it, which would be in the future, and that's a projected condition. And you can see, even on that little short line there, that model is actually fairly accurate for this street section. It tracks pretty well the condition over time. There's a spike because the PCI was measured a week after the microsurface was applied, so you got that blush of goodness that rapidly went away. But that's a typical condition plot. We photograph every sample, and we added that to the application because we could. It's an Android. It's got a camera. It's got GPS, so we're capturing GPS data. And we go, what the heck? We'll take a picture of the sample as they inspect it. Turns out that is one of the best tools that we have to actually take photographs of these streets as they are inspected. So we photograph every sample, and again, we're doing about 15%. A sample is about a 100-foot hunk of road. So, we might do 3, 4, 5 on a typical residential street section. The measurement process we do with engineering students, recently mostly from KU and K-State, although we'd welcome Rolla, UMKC, anybody else that wanted to work for us over the summer. Last summer we hired 10 college students, 8 of which were paver inspectors, and we pair them in teams of 2, so it's 2 college students that do the inspections. We rotate their partners every week so as not to introduce bias between the teams. And at the beginning of the summer when they start, we spend about a week calibrating the teams. We go out and inspect the same street sections. We pick streets that would have a fairly rich set of distresses, and Paver has 19 asphalt distresses and 19 concrete distresses. So we send the college kids out, and they measure the same streets without comparing notes until each team gets within about 5 points of what the PCI would be. And then during the course of the summer, we measure we calculate the PCI that they've inspected. We compare that to a projected PCI, and if that difference, if it's not fairly close, we look at the photographs that they've taken to see if we can explain why the PCI would be so much different. Utility companies are not your friend when you're trying to do small sampling statistics and require homogeneous sections, because we find often that you get a big old patch that a utility has put in one of our streets, and obviously that gives you a higher PCI if the street that was patched was pretty crappy to begin with. The cost of doing that is about $50 a lane mile. We have 2,000 lane miles. We spend about $50,000 a year, so it's about $100,000 over 2 years to do 2,000 lane miles. So that works out by the time we hire the college kids and we equip them and put gas in the vehicle, and sometimes rent pickups, which is no easy task if you're trying to rent a vehicle for a 19 or 20-year-old. Pretty pricey. So we spend, like I said, about $50,000 a year in doing the program. In terms of Overland Park's pavement preservation philosophy, our philosophy is that you need to, number one, keep your good streets good. Secondly, you need to identify streets that have been used beyond their useful life. Are you guys mostly DOT guys? City guys? Any city guys? Am I the only one? One city guy. Thanks. I think DOTs generally have, when they design a highway, tell me if I'm wrong, you design it for a design life, and then you probably operate it for that design life, and then your state legislature makes you operate it for another half again of its design life. So in Kansas, that's about 30 to 45 years for a highway. Cities, the budget that cities have, you design a road and you build a road, they expect it to last, given the budget that we're given to rebuild them, about 300 years. So we have a number of streets that have gone beyond their useful life. We have a number of streets that have survived for reasons that we as engineers cannot explain. And then our third priority would be to rebuild as the budget allows. Streets that have lived beyond their useful life, we rebuild those. The problem that most small cities have, most cities in general, is the politicians say, well, this street is terrible, you need to rebuild it. You spend all your money rebuilding the street and then let your good streets go bad, so that all of them need to be rebuilt. So our spending priorities, again, are to keep our good streets good, which is politically it's a challenge to convince politicians that you need to do that. To keep all streets operable, at least so you can drive on them. And remember, you can drive on dirt, so that's not a real high challenge. It's not 70 miles an hour. And then lastly, to take whatever money's left over and rebuild what streets we can. This is a good street by definition, by PCI definition. It's a 61.2 at the time of that inspection. I'm guessing that most of you recognize that this street is not perfect. The people that live there go, what in the hell are you doing overlaying or treating my street? It was perfectly fine. There wasn't anything wrong with it. But this is the poster child for street condition where you need to actually do something to keep it from failing, keep the base from failing. It's a lot cheaper to maintain the top of the road than the bottom, as you know. Our analysis, again, is focused on keeping our good streets good, developing models that allow us to project what condition would be, looking at the database of streets that we have, and making sure that the streets that are good, the streets that have not failed, stay in that good range. So we look at streets that are getting down to 60, 55, and make sure that we put surface treatments on those before they drop below that level. And we have deterioration rate models for each class of street that we have. I think we have 20 classes of streets that we've identified, and each one of those has a fitted deterioration rate curve, and that's part of the modeling that we do. The maintenance criteria that we use generally are we look at the age of the street, its condition, the priority, which is in a band. If you're looking at good streets, the ones that are near the bottom of the good band are higher priority than the ones near the top. And then we can apply the budget to the model and have it run through the model until it runs out of funds. It would be nice, well, maybe it would, if a computer model could give you the answer to life's pressing problems, including what streets need to be maintained. It never works out that way. So if you're maintaining all but one street in the neighborhood, you will be in big trouble. So we do look at, if we're doing all the streets in all but one of the streets in the neighborhood, we'll do the other one even though it may not meet the modeled criteria. And that's, I say one, but it's more than that. Our primary pavement preservation treatment is chip seal. Overland Park started chip sealing in the 1960s. We chip sealed up until the mid-1990s. A subdivision in Overland Park that had high-end houses and transplants from California complained bitterly about how terrible the chip seal was. They didn't spend $750,000 on their house to have gravel road in front of it, and so they killed it, and we went to microsurfacing. But we have demonstrated through our pavement management system that chip seal is a very cost-effective and effective treatment, and the one that we replaced it with was not. So we use chip seal as the primary treatment for all non-thoroughfare streets in Overland Park that have a speed limit less than 45 miles an hour. We're using currently a 3/8 by number 4 chip, and we're getting that. This year we got it from Iron Mountain, south of St. Louis, and we would allow the granite that comes in from Arkansas. We're using a 60% embedment with, Kansas calls this a CRS 1 HP, but I think everybody else on the planet calls it a CRS 2P, 65% emulsion. Preparation for that is, if it's a good street, we do base repair. If we find alligator cracking, we'll cut that out and replace it, and then seal any cracks that are 3/8 inch wider or wider, which is, I think you can stick a number 2 lead pencil in the crack, and we seal it. And then we mill the pavement markings prior to the chip seal if it has pavement markings. If it's a bad street, basically we just patch the potholes, remove the pavement millings, and chip seal it. We do chip bad streets because politically we have to do something, but those streets returned according to the Paver condition, a fair or bad condition pretty quickly. Another treatment that we use is just an asphalt overlay, and we limit that pretty much to good streets that are 30 years old. We do not overlay bad streets, because then you just spent 10 times what a chip seal costs on a road that'll look bad in about 3 years. So it doesn't make any sense to spend a bunch of money on a thin asphalt overlay if you don't have a base underneath it that's good. So we analyze the street and make sure it's good before we overlay it. The prep for that, again, is to do base repair. We do replace bad curb. The ADA requires you to build ramps where they're deficient, so we do that. And we mill the street to restore the original design section. Chip seal tends to distort the shape of the road. Our asphalt is a 60 Revolution Super Pave. Typically it's 12.5 millimeter nominal aggregate size, and we allow up to 35% frap. That's worked out really well for us. It's a good product, and that's what we use for new construction. For our thoroughfares, we have gone to UBAS. We do overlay, but the primary thoroughfare treatment is UBAS. And there again, we look at roads that are thoroughfares that are, it's been 8 years or so since they've been treated at all, or 10 after an overlay. The design we're using is pretty much a KDOT standard design. And we mill, we call that texturing actually, so as not to confuse the ADA, but we texture the surface of the road to receive the treatment and then place it so that UBAS is a very open graded mix. We try to get it where you don't have water ponded at the curb side, so we raise it slightly above the curb lip. And that seems to work out that's been a really good treatment. And those roads are the smoothest roads we have in Overland Park. The UBAS, even years later, are smoother than brand new asphalt, according to our roughometer. By having a pavement management system, you can project the future condition of your road network. So this graph, this busy-looking graph, is a 25-year model of our Overland Park street network. And on the top it says $7.7 million 25-year plan. So if we spent $7.7 million annually on street maintenance, and our model is correct, and it seems to be pretty good, over the course of 25 years, the average network condition, which is that blue sawtooth line, would be below the good band. It's sawtooth because it reflects the increase in PCI that you get from your surface treatments that you do every year. So that's what that looks like. On the bottom, the bar charts are streets that have failed, basically. So $7.7 million, neighborhoods going in the toilet. If we bump that to $12 million, it stabilizes it. And we prepared these graphs during the middle of the recession that we're, I think, slowly climbing out of right now. And that was the justification that we used to sell the city council that they needed to increase the maintenance budget, and it's effective. So if nothing else, having a good pavement management system is beneficial from the standpoint it helps justify increasing maintenance budgets with models that are real, that show a real effect. So in terms of pavement management, having a pavement management system allows us to measure the condition of a road network in terms that are repeatable and accurate. In our case, because we did curbs starting back in the late 80s, we were able to demonstrate that the concrete that we were using was not durable, and we changed the concrete spec in Overland Park to require a hard rock aggregate, which has saved us countless dollars in terms of curb replacement. The local limestones, I think, were quarried out in the 1960s maybe, and what was built during the 70s, 80s, and 90s is not freeze-thaw resistant, and in Overland Park we found a lot of it that failed pretty quickly. It also allowed us to demonstrate the benefits of chip seal over micro. Trained pavement engineers, people that do this for a living, can recognize flaws in pavements. Politicians and people that live on the street don't. So having a system that gives you a measure that you can, it's like going to the doctor, I guess, for an x-ray. They know what what it looks like, it's repeatable, it allows you to measure things. Our pavement management system has eliminated politics. Our council people don't question what we're doing because they ask questions, but they don't question the validity of the process. And so you can demonstrate if you spend money in this area, this is the benefit that you'll get from it. If you let that go, this is the result. So having a pavement management system is a very important element for local street maintenance. And it gives us feedback. If we try a new product, we can look to see the impact that that's had on our street network. So when we went back to chip seal, we used a smaller aggregate, hoping it was more palatable to the residents. And we found that the smaller gradation wasn't as effective as the gradation we're currently using. And you can get that kind of feedback pretty quickly. So that's it. Any questions? The question was, what kind of hard rock aggregate for our concrete did we switch to? And the answer is we changed to there's several approved hard rock sources. There's Granite Mountain that comes out of Arkansas. It's actually a nepheline cyanide, it's not a granite. There's Meridian Granite out of Oklahoma. There's Pink Quartzite that actually has left the Kansas City market now, I understand. Recently, the Iron Mountain Trap Rock has re-entered the Kansas City market. Kansas City, Missouri used it for years downtown. It's back now. And we would approve the Lincoln Quartzite out of central Kansas, but nobody's brought that in to us.